तं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्य मनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च। श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्री राधा कृष्ण पादान् सहगना ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितांश्च। नमः ओं विष्णुपदाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। नमो महावदन्याय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नाम्ने गौरद्विषे नमः। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, Hare Krishna. So last time we had started our discussion on the 6 characteristics of pure devotional service, and we had discussed the first one, that is Kleshagni. So here we had discussed about the 3 causes of suffering, namely avidya, that is ignorance, and the second one is bija, that is the material desires, and the third one is papam, the sinful activities. So these are the 3 causes of suffering. And then we had discussed in detail how by the practice of devotional service, all these various causes of suffering are destroyed. And then we discussed how when one commits a sinful activity, there are 2 reactions, that is aprarabdham, that is the unmanifest reaction. And the second one is the prarabdham, or the mature or the manifest reaction, for which one is suffering right now. And then we discussed how by the practice of devotional service, the aprarabdham is
I think Prabhuji left, Prabhu.
We lost him. Prabhuji, you are on mute, Leon Prabhu.
Yeah.
Prabhu, it was showing Prabhuji has left actually.
Why only 36 are there?
Got disconnected.
Who else is missing?
It was showing VVD left, Prabhu. I don't know. I hope.
No, that's true, Prabhuji. I'm asking, how come all our team is still not there? Is there anybody else missing?
Total strength is 47, Prabhu.
Yeah. We still have 10 people missing. A lot of them. Madhavi Mataji is not there.
No, she's there.
She's there, Prabhu. She's there.
Oh, you're also there. Yeah.
Mahalingam Prabhu is not there.
Yeah. We both are there. We connected separately.
Can somebody call Mahalingam Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. I'm doing it, Prabhu.
Yes, thank you. Who else is missing? Can somebody call Murlidhar Goen Prabhu?
We'll do that, Prabhu. Murlidhar will go in, Prabhu. I'll call him.
Yes. And who else? Loesh Prabhu is there? Is Ananda Prabhu there?
Jyotsna Mataji is there.
Yeah, Vani Mataji is missing. Is somebody called Vani Mataji?
Mr. Vijay will call.
Yeah. And somebody else can call Jyotsna Mataji. Can one of you call Jyotsna Mataji?
Yes, Prabhuji, I'll call.
Yeah, thank you. And somebody help me. Who else is missing here? Lavani Mataji is missing.
ఉన్నారు ప్రభు.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Unnara? Okay, okay.
ప్రభు పూణే డివోటీస్ అనుకుంటా, ఇద్దరు డివోటీస్ ఎవరో
వాళ్ళిద్దరు లేరు. లాస్ట్ మాడ్యూల్ లో లేరు.
Mataji, class join లేదు. Mataji, you have to join before, not after. It's already 8 minutes late. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, get your warning end, Prabhuji.
Mataji, it's very, we are joining later.
మా క్లాస్ లీడర్ ఉన్నప్పుడు చాలా వార్నింగ్ ఇచ్చారు మాకు.
Raju Prabhu is there. I don't know if Sirisha Mataji is counted or not.
Hare Krishna,
where is
Prabhuji.
Raju?
Yeah, yes, Prabhuji. She will join, Prabhuji. I called just now. She is joining.
Yes. Please, Prabhuji. Yeah, I think Prabhuji came back. Yeah.
Lakshmi Mataji is there.
Mahesh Prabhu, can you call Lakshmi Mataji?
I'm there. I'm actually joined 5 minutes before. Yeah.
Hare Krishna, sorry, there was a power cut.
Hare Krishna.
No problem.
So, so we were just discussing how by the practice of devotional service, all the prarabdha is destroyed, and then even the prarabdha can be modified. So this example is given, Devotee speaking to Lord Kapiladev, that even one is born in a family of dog eaters, one becomes eligible to perform Vedic sacrifices by chanting the holy names. So that's how the prarabdha is also modified. So even though the birth cannot be changed, but still the effects of the birth, the results of the birth can be modified by the practice of devotional service. So then we had come to the point where, so if by the practice of devotional service, all the prarabdha is destroyed, then why do devotees, after practicing devotional service, then why do they still continue to suffer? So we'll have a brief discussion now. A more detailed discussion will be when we discuss the 10th chapter of the Nectar of Devotion. But now we will just have a brief discussion on the point. So Giraj Maharaj in a lecture, he says, Srila Prabhupada has given some other hints which could help us resolve this question. He has said that when the devotee surrenders to Krishna, Krishna will take charge of the devotee's sinful reactions and use the devotee's sinful reactions for the best benefit of the devotee. So that means when one begins devotional service, Krishna takes charge. And in a normal case, the material nature gives sinful reactions. But in the case of the devotee, Krishna takes charge of those sinful reactions, and then whatever is needed for the devotee, Krishna can increase, decrease, modify, whatever Krishna wants to do, he will do for the best benefit of the devotee. So we know this famous verse of Brahmaji's praise, Tattenukampam susamikshmano bhunjana evatma kritam vipakam vidvagvapuvir vidadan namaste jivetayo muktipade sadhaya bhak. My dear Lord, one who earnestly waits for you to bestow your causeless mercy upon him, all the while patiently suffering the reactions of his past misdeeds and offering your respectful obeisances with his heart, words and body, is surely eligible for liberation, for it has become his rightful claim. Okay, so even though the devotee suffers, the devotee accepts it as anukampa, that means Krishna's mercy, and he understands Bunjana evatma kritam vipakam. So he understands that it is due to my own past misdeeds, and therefore he thinks that Krishna has actually reduced the suffering. He should have suffered much more, but Krishna has reduced it and given only a token punishment. And so therefore, Ridvagvapuvir Vedadhan Namaste. Therefore, he offers obeisances. He thanks the Lord with his body, mind, and words. and then such a devotee becomes eligible for liberation. Okay, so this is a commentary on this verse. Somebody can please read.
Not moving.
Even a
Krishna Prabhuji.
person born in a family of dog eaters immediately becomes eligible to perform Vedic
Oh,
sacrifices.
sorry. I think so. The slides have not moved ahead. So I'll share
Like
again.
Devotee to Kapila Dev.
Okay, you can see this now. Because in his mind.
Yeah. Kleshagni. Because in his mind, a devotee may still maintain the remnants of his previous sinful mentality. The Lord removes the last vestiges of the enjoying spirit by giving his devotee punishments that may sometimes resemble sinful reactions. Although a devotee has surrendered to the Lord's devotional service, until he is completely perfect in Krishna consciousness, he may maintain a slight inclination to enjoy the false happiness of this world.
Continue, please.
The Lord therefore creates a particular situation to eradicate this remaining enjoying spirit. This unhappiness suffered by a sincere devotee is not technically a karmic reaction. It is rather the Lord's special mercy for inducing his devotee to completely let go of the material world and return home back to God.
Okay, so here it is explained that one of the reasons why the devotees suffer is because they still have some vestiges, remnants of the enjoying mentality. And so therefore, Krishna, to eradicate this enjoying spirit, Krishna gives some punishment, which appears to be like a karmic reaction, but it is actually the Lord's special mercy, so that the devotee completely gives up the enjoying spirit and becomes qualified to go back to Godhead. Another reason why a devotee may suffer is because the Lord wants to help the devotee give up his material attachments. And so this is a verse which is spoken by the Supreme Lord himself to Yudhishthira Maharaj. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Yasyaham Anugrinnami Harishe Tadhanam Shane Tato Dhanam Tyajantya Asya Swajana Dukkha Dukkitam. The personality of God had said, if I especially favor someone, I gradually deprive him of his wealth. Then the relatives and friends of such a poverty-stricken man abandon him. In this way, he suffers one distress after another. So the Lord wants to help the devotee totally give up the material attachments. And so if Krishna sees that somebody is materially attached, then Krishna takes away his wealth and whatever the other attachments he has, and then the devotee has no other shelter than the Lord's lotus feet. And in this way, the Lord actually helps him. So this is his Anugrinnami. This is actually his mercy on his devotees. Srila Prabhupada remember this verse when his business collapsed. Right, so this is from the Madhuri Kadamini. In another place, the Lord says, Nirdhanatva Maharogo Mat Anugraha Lakshanam. The awesome affliction known as poverty is in fact a sign of mercy. The truth is that the Supreme Lord, the greatest benefactor of his devotees, purposely inflicts suffering on his devotees just to increase their humility and yearning for him. Okay, so this is also one of the reasons why a devotee may suffer, because the Lord wants to increase the humility and yearning of the devotee for him, and so therefore he puts him into a suffering condition. Thus, the devotee's woes are not because of fruitive reactions, nor are they reactions of prarabdha sins. Now, another reason for devotee suffering is offenses. So again, from the Madhuri Kadamini, the following quote from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu further states. So Vishnu Thakur is quoting this from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Ete aparadha vipendra namno bhagavata krita vinignanti nrinam krityam prakritam hyanayanti hi. O best of the Brahmanas, offenses against the holy name result in a person losing all piety, and for him the mundane manifests in transcendental objects. So when one commits offenses, especially offenses against the holy name, then the result is all the transcendental objects, spiritual objects, appear to be mundane. That means he loses the taste. He loses the taste for spiritual subject matters. And then what happens as a result of that? What is the destructive nature of these offenses against the holy name? Hearing and chanting the Lord's holy name, qualities and so on bestows prema. Visiting place of pilgrimage connected with the Lord's pastimes rewards one with perfection, and regularly honoring the Lord's prasadam subdues the senses. Yet Namaprad is so devastating that although transcendental and completely spiritual, these activities appear mundane. Okay, so all these spiritual activities appear mundane. So the devotee who commits offenses loses taste for all these spiritual activities. And then obviously he takes to material activities. Obviously, if one doesn't have taste for spiritual activities, then the only option is to perform material activities. And then one once again lands up into material life, and material life means suffering. So how serious are these offenses that can cause such a phenomenon? Somebody can read this, please.
Yes, Prabhu. One may say that the offender against the holy name is condemned to develop aversion to God, making it impossible for him to remain firmly fixed in devotional service under the guidance of his Guru. This is certainly true. It is also true that just as a very sick patient loses his appetite, a grievous offender to the holy name loses his attachment for hearing, chanting, and other devotional activities. However, just as the patient's sickness abates after some time, his appetite gradually returning, so also when the offender's sensual cravings decrease after a long period of sense enjoyment, his interest in devotional service is rekindled.
Okay, so he loses taste for hearing, chanting, and other activities. But then when he goes through the suffering of material life and after the atonement for the offense has been done, then once again his taste for devotional service can be rekindled. Okay, fine. So these are some of the reasons why there is suffering in the life of a devotee. Okay, this way. Okay, so this is in brief what we have discussed about why a devotee suffers. We will have another discussion when we go to the 10th chapter. So that time we will be discussing in more details. Okay, but in any case, if somebody has any questions on what we discussed, you can ask before we go to the next chapter.
Krishna Prabhuji, Pranam.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
My question is that if we know in advance that this is what is going to come, like a devotee of Krishna is subject to much more testing, and that there will be so much suffering, then what if somebody gets averse to devotion life and moves away? What is it that we can keep to keep us motivated in this path and not get deterred from here?
So what you're asking is that somebody who knows that there'll be suffering on the path of devotional service may be demotivated to practice.
Yeah, because we are reading this in advance. Like I'm just 3 years into the system. Somebody might be 1 year, 2 years. So, and there is a long road ahead. And now we are knowing that, okay, there is something like that. So what can keep us motivated to stay in this path?
Prevention is better than cure. So here we are discussing what are the causes of suffering. So one is some vestige of sense enjoyment, the sense enjoyment spirit, or offenses, material attachments. So these are the causes for the suffering. So when we know that these are the cause of suffering, then better give up the causes. So try and give up material attachments, the enjoying spirit, try and avoid offenses. So by leading a life which is in accordance to the scriptures, then one can be saved from the suffering. And the more we take to Krishna consciousness seriously, then the more one can get purified. That is one point. Another point is, in any case, what is the option? What is the option? The other option is simply materialistic life, and materialistic life means more suffering. So at least
Also,
this is like somebody has a sickness. He understood that he has a sickness. He goes to the doctor. So the doctor recommends some surgery. So the surgery is definitely painful, but then at least he knows that by the surgery he'll get cured. So here,
also
here similarly, so Krishna is whatever Krishna is doing is for the best benefit of the devotee. So even though Krishna puts some suffering condition in the life of a devotee, that is for the benefit of the devotee. So it is just like the surgery. So then after that, he gets purified of the contamination, and then he can lead a normal life in the sense that purified life.
Also, Prabhuji, I have observed that, like suppose when I was not in Krishna consciousness, a particular misery made me much more miserable than when I am in Krishna consciousness. The tolerance to that particular misery is much more. I don't feel that much pain. So is it possible that this observation is for outsiders thinking that these people are suffering, but the devotee actually doesn't feel that much pain? Is it possible, or devotee actually feels the pain and suffering?
No, that point is correct. A devotee definitely increases the level of tolerance. And as we were discussing the Tatyanukambam verse, so a devotee, he understands that actually this is due to my own past misdeeds. And so therefore he is in a better position to tolerate the suffering. That's good.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Anything else? Okay, fine. So we will proceed ahead to the remaining characteristics of pure devotional service. And the second one is Shubhada. Pure devotional service is all auspicious. Is everyone able to see?
No, Prabhu, the screen did not
No,
change.
Prabhu.
Okay,
No,
again,
Screen.
I don't know why every time this.
Screen frozen, it seems.
Okay, now?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah. Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, so pure devotional service is all auspicious. Shubhani Prinanam Sarva Jagatam Anuraktata Sadguna Sukham Iti Adinya Akyathani Manishivi. So there are 4 characteristics of Shubhada. So these are the 4 characteristics. Sarva Jagatam Prinanam, compassion for everyone. Anuraktata, attracts everyone. Sadguna, bestows good qualities. And Sukham, bestows superior happiness. So these are the 4 qualities of Shubhada. So we'll discuss each one of them. So the first one is Sarva Jagatam Prinanam, compassion for everyone. Okay. So I think so we can read from the book. Krishna consciousness is all auspicious. So somebody can read the first 2 paragraphs.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Srila Rupa Goswami has given a definition of auspiciousness. He says that actual auspiciousness means welfare activities for all the people of the world. At the present moment, groups of people are engaged in welfare activities in terms of society, community, or nation. There is even an attempt in the form of the United Nations for World Health Activity. But due to the shortcomings of the limited national activities, such a general mass welfare program for the whole world is not practically possible. The Krishna consciousness movement, however, is so nice that it can render the highest benefit to the entire human race. Everyone can be attracted by this movement and everyone can feel the result. Therefore, Rupa Goswami and other learned scholars agree that a broad propaganda program for the Krishna consciousness movement of devotional service all over the world is the highest humanitarian welfare activity. How the Krishna consciousness movement can attract the attention of the whole world and how each and every man can feel pleasure in this Krishna consciousness is stated in the Padma Purana as follows. A person who is engaged in devotional service in full Krishna consciousness is to be understood to be being the best service to the whole world and to be pleasing everyone in the world. In addition to human society, he is pleasing even the trees and animals because they also become attracted by such a movement. A practical example of this was shown by Lord Chaitanya when he was traveling through the forests of Jharikanda in central India for spreading his Sankirtana movement. The tigers, the elephants, the deer, and all other wild animals joined him and were participating in their own ways by dancing and chanting Hare Krishna.
Okay, so here the first point is Sarva Jagatam Prinam. So when one takes to devotional service, then he actually feels compassion for everyone because philosophically he understands that every living entity is a part and parcel of Krishna. And so therefore, he is actually able to show compassion for everyone on the spiritual platform. Now, in this material world, we find that somebody may show compassion for some living entities. Like there are some social welfare workers who may show compassion for poor people. And then, of course, Srila Prabhupada, he condemns this Daridra Narayan Seva. Why Narayan is there only with the Daridra. And Srila Prabhupada's understanding is that whether one is poor or rich, spiritually, both are poor. And so therefore, ultimately, everyone needs Krishna consciousness. But we find there are philanthropists, social welfare workers who want to feed the hungry people, who want to give medicines to the sick people, who want to give other facilities to the needy. And so in this way, we find that the area of compassion is limited. Or there are some people who show compassion for some animals, and there are some people who show compassion to dogs. There are some people who show compassion to birds and snakes. And so different people, according to their own conceptions, have their different understandings of what compassion is. Some people want to save the trees. But then Srila Prabhupada, he would say in his lectures, so though they are doing Daridra Narayan Seva, but why they're killing the goat Narayan to feed the Daridra Narayan? So on one hand, they are showing compassion to humans, but they have no compassion for the animals. And they have no worries about all the slaughtering of animals that is taking place. Why? Because there is no philosophical basis for their compassion. It is simply mental concoction. And therefore, only when a devotee understands that every living entity, be it man, animal, bird, whatever, everyone is ultimately a child of Krishna. Everyone is a part and parcel of Krishna. When one has the proper philosophical understanding, then one can actually show compassion for everyone. And so therefore, we see, as Srila Prabhupada is mentioning here, in the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he didn't make any distinction. So he was showing compassion even for the animals. Like in the Jharikhand forest, he showed compassion even to the tigers and the deer. And there are also other pastimes where Mahaprabhu showed compassion to a dog. So, and what to speak of all the human beings. So he showed compassion for everyone. Sarva Jagatam Prinam. Again, Srila Prabhupada is talking about the United Nations. So the United Nations, they are trying to bring about peace and reduce quarrel, war. But then, as Srila Prabhupada again in his lecture, he says, after World War I, they tried to bring about peace by establishing the League of Nations. That was in 1914. And then later on, but then afterwards, there was World War II. And after World War II, they established United Nations. But has the war stopped? No, now also there is war after so many years. Why? Because the center for establishing peace and unity, the foundation for establishing peace and unity is not there. So Srila Prabhupada would often say that you cannot bring peace among barking dogs. So the United Nations is like an assembly of barking dogs, because each one has their own center. Each nation is coming to the United Nations, but then each one has his own center, his own agenda. And so because there is no commonality, there's no common purpose. So therefore there cannot be actual peace and unity. And that is what we are practically saying. And as Srila Prabhupada would often say that even though they have established United Nations, but the flags of the countries in the United Nations office are simply increasing. That means there is more war, there is more division, there are more nations. So where is the peace? So therefore, peace and compassion on a material platform cannot exist. It has to be on the spiritual platform where there is one common goal, one common cause, and everyone understands that ultimately everyone is a part and parcel of Krishna. So real auspiciousness and real compassion, real peace and unity can be had only on the spiritual platform with a proper philosophical understanding. The second characteristic is anuraktata. So both of them are very much related. So if one shows compassion for everyone, that means one is actually thinking about the welfare of everyone, then automatically others also reciprocates and others also become attracted to such a movement which is showing compassion for every living entity. And so automatically everyone becomes attracted to a devotee, to Krishna consciousness, because there is true compassion being shown to every living entity. And so therefore, even the animals and everyone else becomes attracted to Krishna consciousness and to a devotee. So in this context, this verse from the 4th canto is being quoted. This quality of being honored by all others is also noted in the story of Dhruva. Yasya prasanno bhagavan guner maitri adibir hari tasmai namanti bhutani nimnam apa iva swayam. Unto one who has transcendental qualities due to friendly behavior with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all living entities offer honor, just as water automatically flows down by nature. Okay, so a devotee, because of his relationship with the Supreme Lord, and because of the relationship with the Supreme Lord, he has relationship with all living entities, and he shows friendly behavior towards all living entities. And as a result, all the living entities offer honor to such a devotee, just as water automatically flows down by nature. This was at the Delhi Pandal program. At the Delhi Pandal program, Srila Prabhupada, he was giving these programs where almost every day 20,000, 30,000 people were attending. And there were people from such a wide range of society, politicians, leaders, and religious people. So many people were attending, and everyone was showing so much of respect to Srila Prabhupada. And so at the end of one program, one devotee, he commented to Srila Prabhupada, everyone loves you so much. And Srila Prabhupada said, because I love them. So that's a devotee. Because a devotee, he loves every living entity and he shows compassion towards every living entity, then automatically others also reciprocate by showing love and respect towards a devotee. And that's how a devotee attracts everyone. Krishna consciousness attracts everyone because only a devotee can actually show compassion towards everyone. Now, the next point is under Shubhada, Sadguna produces good qualities. So somebody can read from the book now. Furthermore.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Yeah. Furthermore, a person engaged in Krishna consciousness, acting in devotional service, can develop all the good qualities that are generally found in the demigods. It is said by Sukdev Goswami in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 18th chapter, verse 12. My dear king, persons who have unflinching faith in Krishna and are without any duplicacy can develop all the good qualities of the demigods. On account of a devotee's high grade of Krishna consciousness, even the demigods like to live with him, and therefore it can be understood that the qualities of the demigods have dwelt within his body.
Continue, please.
On the other hand, a person who is not in Krishna consciousness has no good qualities. He may be highly educated from the academic point of view, but in the actual field of his activities, he can be seen to be baser than the animals. Even though a person is highly educated academically, if he cannot go beyond the sphere of mental activities, then he is sure to perform only material activities and thus remains impure. There are so many persons in the modern world who have been highly educated in the materialistic universities, but it is seen that they cannot take up the movement of Krishna consciousness and develop the high qualities of the demigods. For example, a Krishna conscious boy, even if he is not very well educated by the university standard, can immediately give up all illicit sex, life, gambling, meat eating, and intoxication. Whereas those who are not in Krishna consciousness, although very highly educated, are often drunkards, meat eaters, sex mongers, and gamblers. These are practical proof of a Krishna conscious person becomes highly developed in good qualities, whereas a person who is not in Krishna consciousness cannot do so. We experience that even a young boy in Krishna consciousness is unattached to cinemas, nightclubs, naked dance show, restaurants, liquor shops, etc. He becomes completely freed. He saves his valuable time from being extravagantly spent in the way of smoking, drinking, attending the theater, and dancing. One who is not in Krishna consciousness usually cannot sit silently, even for half an hour. The yoga system teaches that if you become silent, you will realize that you are God. This system may be all right for materialistic person, but how long will they be able to keep themselves silent? Artificially, they may sit down for so-called meditation, but immediately after their yogic performance, they will engage themselves again in such activities as illicit sex life, gambling, meat eating, and many other nonsensical things. But a Krishna conscious person gradually elevates himself without endeavoring for the so-called silent meditation. Simply because he is engaged in Krishna consciousness, he automatically gives up all this nonsense and develops a high character. One develops the highest character by becoming a pure devotee of Krishna. The conclusion is that no one can truly have any good qualities if he is lacking Krishna consciousness.
Yes. So as Srila Prabhupada is quoting from the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam, this is Prahlad Maharaj speaking. So there it is mentioned, the famous verse, Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavata akinchana sarver gunes tatra samasate suraha harava bhaktasya kuto mahadguna manoratena sati dhavato bhahi. So when one takes to the practice of devotional service, then automatically one develops all the good qualities of the devatas. Why? Srila Prabhupada explains in his purports and lectures that normally the spirit soul, being a part and parcel of Krishna, has all the good qualities of Krishna. But in material life, all these good qualities are covered by material contamination. And because of that, the natural good qualities of the soul are not manifest. But by practice of Krishna consciousness, as one becomes purified of the material contamination, then the natural good qualities of the soul begin to manifest. So as the purification takes place, the good qualities automatically manifest. So therefore, the non-devotee, even though he may be academically well educated and may pose himself as well behaved and so on, but actually he cannot have any good qualities because of the material contamination. And so therefore, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning that even though they may be highly educated, having big posts and positions and so on and so forth, but still they are addicted to all sorts of nonsensical things. And Srila Prabhupada is explaining that this even applies to some so-called spiritualists, like somebody doing some sort of meditation. And Srila Prabhupada in his lectures often speaks about a group who was practicing some so-called transcendental meditation in the US at that time, that there was a guru who was quite famous. And Srila Prabhupada, he says that even though they may sit down for meditation for some time, but then after that, they're doing all nonsense. In one lecture, Srila Prabhupada is saying that he actually saw somebody who was doing some yogic asanas For 10-15 minutes, they do that. And then immediately after that, they have to smoke. So they cannot give up all these bad practices because there's no purification of the heart actually taking place. And yes, Srila Prabhupada also gives his own practical experience at Allahabad. And he says there was one big Mayavadi sannyasi. So many thousands of people came to listen to him. But immediately after the lecture was over, he came behind the stage and he asked, where is BD? Cigarette. So that's how we find even the so-called transcendentalists who are not actually practicing devotional service and are not purified, then they also cannot give up all these bad habits, and they cannot actually develop a good character. And so therefore, the important point is that on the path of devotional service, it is very important that we develop the good character, because that is actually the proof of purification. Srila Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavad Gita 8 chapter 28 verse purports. You may have already read this. Srila Prabhupada writes that the study of the Vedas is not meant for the recreation of armchair speculators, but for the formation of character. So this is the main purpose of our studying the scriptures. The main purpose is so that we get purified of the material contamination and we develop good qualities and good character. That is the important thing. So also again, maybe this was discussed in the 13th chapter, verses 8 to 12, where Krishna is describing Jnanam. So there also, it is actually a list of good qualities. Amanitvam, Adambitvam, Ahimsa, Arjavam. So a big list of 20 items of knowledge. They're all good qualities. And so this is actual knowledge. So one who has actually true knowledge. And when we speak of true knowledge, it's the knowledge about the Atma, Paramatma, and the difference between matter and spirit. This is true knowledge. So when one has true knowledge, the symptom of true knowledge is that one develops good qualities. Otherwise, without the development of good qualities, there is no meaning to knowledge. Because when one has true knowledge, one acts on that knowledge, then one gets purified. And when one gets purified, then true good qualities actually develop. So in fact, in that purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that one can test how much one is advancing in devotional service. One can test by the development of these good qualities. And again, in the 12th chapter of the Gita also, we see that how towards the end of the 12th chapter, the last section from verses 13 to 20 is actually a list of good qualities by which one can become dear to Krishna. So after the entire description of Bhakti Yoga from chapters 7 to 12, Krishna is concluding that section of Bhakti Yoga by giving a list of good qualities, because that is actually the result of the practice of Bhakti Yoga. So the result of the practice of Bhakti Yoga should be the development of good qualities. In a famous verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we won't go into the details of the pastime, but Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu makes this famous statement, Dharma Sthapana Hetu Sadhura Vyavahar. Dharma Sthapana Hetu Sadhura Vyavahar. That means the principles of religion are established by the behavior of a sadhu, a saintly person. And Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas explain in great detail that how actually it is very difficult for the common man to understand the principles of dharma. Why? Dharmasya tattvam nihitam guhayam. Because the principles of religion are very, very confidential. And especially one may understand or one may know the religious principles, but actually applying them and putting them into practice is even more difficult, because it's very confidential in the sense that it's not so easy to understand how to apply the principles of religion in one's life practically. That was the problem of even Arjuna. So the famous verse, 2nd chapter, 7th verse, Arjuna is saying, Karpanya dosho pahata swabhava prichami tvam dharma samudha chetaha. Okay, so there also that word is coming, dharma samudha cheta. That means he's confused about how to practice the principles of religion. He definitely knew the principles. He was talking about all the principles of dharma. But on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, how to apply those principles, he was confused. And so therefore, it is not so easy to understand how to apply the principles of dharma in one's life. And therefore, Mahajano Yena Gatasapanta. And therefore, in order to understand how to apply the principles of religion, one needs to follow the Mahajans. But the point is that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying that the principles of religion are established by the behavior of a sadhu. So people may not understand how to apply dharma in their lives, but they understand that by seeing the behavior of a saintly person, by seeing the behavior of a Mahatma. And therefore, the devotees have a great responsibility to exhibit the proper behavior, because then that inspires other people and guides other people to understand how to apply dharma in their own life. And so therefore, we see that in society, when religionists, when sadhus, they misbehave, then actually it causes a great distrust. In fact, trust breaks down, not only towards a particular religious personality, but towards the practice of religion per se. And then people generalize and say that all religious people are like this, all are hypocrites. And that's how people lose faith in the practice of religion. And so therefore, religionists, saintly people, devotees have a great responsibility in having good character, good behavior, because that is what inspires people to take up to religious practices, to take up to the practice of devotional service. And so therefore, when Srila Prabhupada was asked by a TV reporter, how can we recognize the members of your society? Srila Prabhupada replied by saying that they're perfect ladies and gentlemen. And by saying that, Srila Prabhupada gave all of us within the Krishna Consciousness Society a great responsibility to actually behave like perfect ladies and gentlemen, because that's how we are representing the society, we are representing Srila Prabhupada, and actually we are representing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so therefore, it is very important that even though initially one may not naturally have the good qualities, but as an austerity and as a sadhana, one needs to practice the good qualities by which we can inspire others to take up to the practice of devotional service. And by at least trying to develop the good qualities, then Krishna is pleased by that, and eventually the natural qualities of the soul become manifest. And so therefore, this is one of the effects, the results of the practice of devotional service, and that is all the good qualities develop. So unless one takes to the practice of devotional service by which purification takes place, one cannot actually develop true good qualities. That means the natural qualities of the soul become manifest only when the purification takes place, the material contamination goes away. Otherwise, materialistic people may also exhibit good qualities for some time. Okay, so maybe by their own past karma or by some training, one may have some good qualities, or at least practice. They may be able to practice some good qualities, like we find air hostesses, receptionists, and marketing people, those people who are interacting with others. So then they are trained. They're trained to put up plastic smiles and behave very beautifully with other people, because that's their business. But then those qualities cannot last long because they are simply on a superficial material platform. But when one actually takes to the practice of devotional service and purification takes place, the natural good qualities of the soul become manifest. And then those good qualities are actually steady because they are intrinsic part of the soul. Okay, and the last aspect of Shubhada, auspiciousness, is Sukham, bestows superior happiness. So now Srila Prabhupada, he gives a general description about happiness and Krishna consciousness. So somebody can read from the book, please.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I'll read. Happiness in Krishna consciousness. Srila Rupa Goswami has analyzed the different sources of happiness. He has divided happiness into three categories, which are happiness derived from material enjoyment, happiness derived by identifying oneself with the Supreme Brahman, and happiness derived from Krishna consciousness. In the Tantra Shastra, Lord Shiva speaks to his wife Sati in this way: "My dear wife, A person who has surrendered himself at the lotus feet of Govinda and who has thus developed pure Krishna consciousness can be very easily awarded all the perfections desired by the impersonalists. And beyond this, he can enjoy the happiness achieved by the pure devotees. Happiness derived from pure devotional service is the highest because it is eternal. The happiness derived from the material perfection or understanding oneself to be Brahman is inferior because it's temporary. There is no preventing one's falling down from material happiness, and there is even every chance of falling down from the spiritual happiness derived by identifying oneself with the impersonal Brahman. Next paragraph.
Continue. Yes.
It has been seen that great Mayavadi, impersonalist sannyasis are highly educated and also realized souls. May sometimes take to political activities or to social welfare activities. The reason is that they actually do not derive any ultimate transcendental happiness in the impersonal understanding and therefore must come down to material platform and take to such mundane affairs. There are many instances, especially in India, where these Mayavadi sannyasis descend to the material platform again. But a person who is fully in Krishna consciousness will never return to any sort of material platform. However alluring and attracting they may be, he always knows that no material welfare activities can compare to spiritual activities of Krishna consciousness.
Okay, fine. So, Srila Prabhupada is describing three types of happiness. One is the so-called happiness of material life on the mundane platform, which he describes as Jadanand. The second is the happiness of merging into the impersonal Brahman, which is Brahmananda. And the third is the happiness derived from devotional service, which is Bhaktiananda. Now, the first two categories of happiness, that is happiness due to material sense pleasures and happiness due to merging into the impersonal Brahman or the impersonal Brahman realization, are not real happiness, and therefore they are not steady. So as far as material happiness is concerned, I think so that must have already been described in great detail in discussions on the Bhagavad Gita and at other places. So we won't get into those details, but I'm sure we are all familiar with this verse from the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, verse number 22. And that is...
the screen is not changing. Screen is not changing, Prabhuji.
Yes, I have not changed it as yet.
Okay.
I'm just speaking. So, so the Bhagavad Gita chapter 5 verse 22, Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate adyantavanta kaunteya na teshu ramate buddha. So that is material happiness, born out of contact of the senses with the sense objects. So the result is that dukkha yonaya evate. So the so-called material happiness actually gives rise to distress. And therefore, one who is intelligent does not take part in these sources of misery. And that is the nature of so-called material happiness, which actually leads to suffering. So therefore, that is no real happiness. As Srila Prabhupada explains, material happiness is no real happiness. It's only an absence of suffering. An absence of suffering temporarily is perceived as happiness. So that is material happiness. Now, the second type of happiness is impersonal realization. And that is the happiness of impersonal realization, merging into the impersonal Brahman and so on. And here, Srila Prabhupada is explaining that that is also not permanent, because as the famous verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam goes, that ye anye arvinda daksha vimukta maninas dvayasta bhavad avishuddha buddhaye aruvya krishnena param padam tataha padanti ada anadrita yushmad angraya. So because of not taking shelter of the Lord's lotus feet, therefore the impersonalists, they ultimately fall down from their position. And as Srila Prabhupada is explaining here, so therefore the Mayavadi sannyasis, because they don't find a higher taste in their own spiritual practices, So the nature of the soul is to look for Ananda, Anandmayobhyasat. This is the natural propensity of the soul. The soul is looking for Ananda. So, but because the impersonalists don't find any Ananda in their spiritual practices, then eventually they come down to material activities, thinking that at least these material activities will give me some sort of happiness. And so then they come down to performing social welfare activities, opening schools, hospitals, and so on. And so therefore, even this Brahmananda, or the happiness of impersonal realization, is not a permanent happiness, or it's not actually true happiness. It is again an absence of misery, because the impersonalists, they do understand the difference between body and soul, and therefore they stop performing sinful activities. No sinful activities, no punishment, no suffering. And so on the material platform, there is no suffering, but at the same time, there's no higher taste of relationship with the Supreme Lord. And because they don't experience that higher taste, then eventually they have to come down to the lower taste of so-called material happiness. So that's what happens. Now, the other type of transcendentalists are the yogis. Now, the yogis are trying to gain happiness by attaining mystic siddhis. And so Srila Prabhupada, further down in the purport, explains that what is so great about the mystic siddhis of the yogis, that is being practiced, or to some extent, these siddhis are being acquired even by the scientists. So just read the next paragraph, please. The mystic perfections.
Somebody reading?
Yeah, Prabhuji, I can read through. The mystic perfections achieved by actually successful yogis are 8 in number. Anima Siddhi refers to the power by which one can become so small that he can enter into a stone. Modern scientific improvements also enable us to enter into stone because they provide for excavating so many subways, penetrating the hills, etc. So Anima Siddhi, the mystic perfection of trying to enter into stone, has also been achieved by material science. Similarly, all of the yoga siddhis or perfections are material arts. For example, in one yoga siddhi, there is a development of the power to become so light that one can float in the air or on water. That is also being performed by modern scientists. They are flying in the air, and they're floating on the surface of the water, and they are traveling under the water.
Okay, so in this way, Srila Prabhupada is explaining that there's nothing great about the mystic siddhis. Even scientists, to some extent, are practicing these mystic siddhis. Srila Prabhupada tells the story of one such yogi who went to the Himalayas and practiced yoga, Ashtanga yoga, Dhyana yoga for many years. And after that, he developed this siddhi, Lagima siddhi, of becoming very light. And so then he came back to his village, and there he wanted to demonstrate his siddhi. And so he called all the village people, and then he proclaimed, just see what I can do. And so he called them to the bank of a pond or a river, and then he walked across the river. And of course, all the people were very much amazed. But there was one small boy who commented. He said, what's so great about this? This is worth. And he takes me across the river. So what is so great about this? So the point is that ultimately these mystic siddhis are being acquired even by the materialistic people. So what's so great about the mystic siddhis? And ultimately, of course, they are also temporary. They're present as long as one has the material body. Once the material body is finished, then everything is finished. So, but then yes, there are yogis who have all these siddhis, but there's nothing so great. And so therefore, one may achieve some happiness by acquiring these mystic siddhis, but that's also on the bodily platform, on the material platform. Srila Prabhupada, of course, goes on to give a whole list of various siddhis. Okay. But then, as far as the devotee is concerned, the devotee is not interested in acquiring anything material. So, if you go further down that section, then you will come to this paragraph beginning with, in the Hari Bhakti Sudodai, it is stated that. Did you get it?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, so you can read from that point till the end of that section.
In the Hari Bhakti Subhodaya. Sorry. Can I read, Prabhuji?
Yes, go ahead, go ahead.
In the Hari Bhakti Subhodaya, it is stated that Prahlad Maharaj, a great devotee of the Lord, prayed to Narasimha Deva, the half lion, half man incarnation, as follows: My dear Lord, I repeatedly pray unto your lotus feet that I may simply be stronger in devotional service. I simply pray that my Krishna consciousness may be more strong and steady, because happiness derived out of Krishna consciousness and devotional service is so powerful that with it one can have all the other perfections of religiousness, economic development, sense gratification, and even the attainment of liberation from material existence. Actually, a pure devotee does not aspire after any of these perfections, because the happiness derived from the devotional service in Krishna consciousness is so transcendental and so unlimited that no other happiness can compare to it. It is said that even one drop of happiness in Krishna consciousness stands beyond comparison with an ocean of happiness derived from any other activity. Thus, any person who has developed even a little quantity of pure devotional service can very easily kick out all the other kinds of happiness derived from religiousness, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. There was a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya known as Khula Vecha Sridhara, who was a very poor man. He was doing a small business selling cups made from the leaves of plantain trees, and his income was almost nothing. Still, he was spending 50% of his small income on the worship of the Ganges, and with the other 50%, he was showing somehow living. Lord Chaitanya once revealed himself to this confidential devotee, Kholavecha Sridhara, and offered him any opulence he liked. But Sridhara informed the Lord that he did not want any material opulence. He was quite happy in his present position and wanted only to gain unflinching faith and devotion unto the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya. This is the position of pure devotees. If they can be engaged 24 hours each day in devotional service, they do not want anything else, not even the happiness of liberation or of becoming one with the Supreme. In the Narada Pancharatra, it is also said that any person who has developed even a small amount of devotional service doesn't care a fig for any kind of happiness derived from religiousness, economic development, sense gratification, or the 5 kinds of liberation. Any kind of happiness derived from religiousness, economic development, liberation, or sense gratification cannot even dare to enter into the heart of a pure devotee. It is stated that as the personal attendants and maidservants of a queen follow the queen with all respects and obeisances, similarly, the joys of religiousness, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation follow the devotional service of the Lord. In other words, a pure devotee does not lack any kind of happiness derived from any source. He does not want anything but service to Krishna. But even if he should have another desire, the Lord fulfills this without the devotees asking. Hare Krishna.
Yes. So the pure devotee, he does not desire any of these other types of happiness. So surely not the material happiness, not the happiness of Swargaloka, not the happiness of mystic siddhis, and not even the happiness of liberation. So he does not want any of these other types of happiness. But a devotee, even without asking, as Srila Prabhupada says here, even without asking, he gets all these other types of happiness and much beyond that. And so a devotee automatically gets so much of material opulence, material benedictions, and ultimately he gets liberation from this material world. And a devotee actually even develops all the mystic siddhis. So mystic siddhis are like magic. So magicians, they do so many magical tricks. What is that? That's all basically some mystic siddhis. So that's how Srila Prabhupada explains all this in his lectures. That's how they become so small. And the anima siddhi, they become very small, and then we have the magicians demonstrating all these magical tricks where the magician is put into a box, and then he's completely bound up, and then he comes out of the box and all that. So this is all mystic siddhis basically. So once such a magician was, of course, there are 2-3 pastimes in this connection. So once there was a magician who was performing some magical tricks in front of the devotees, and then devotees were quite impressed. And then he asked Swamiji, can you perform any such magical trick? And then Srila Prabhupada pointed out to all his devotees. And he said that this is the real magic. This is the real magic, saving them from Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi, birth, death, old age, and disease. So can you do that? So that's real magic. This also takes place in one question answer session at the end of one public lecture. So, but in any case, the point is that a devotee actually gets all mystic siddhis. In fact, what Srila Prabhupada achieved was definitely can only be explained by mystic siddhi. What Srila Prabhupada did was cannot be explained by any ordinary course of events. There was no materialistic person who could do something what Srila Prabhupada did, or even come anywhere close to what Srila Prabhupada did in such a short time. And so therefore, and there are many other stories of how devotees actually develop so many mystic siddhis. And the devotee actually has no aspiration for any of these. You can find so many examples here. We find the example of Kolavicha Sridhar, but then we have so many other examples of Haridas Thakur, Murari Gupta, and many other examples in the Srimad Bhagavatam, like Prahlad Maharaj, Prithu Maharaj, so many examples. So why? Because the devotee is tasting a much higher level of happiness in his relationship with the Supreme, and therefore he does not care for all these other types of happiness. So under the title of Shubhadha, that is auspiciousness, there are these 4 characteristics, and that is Sarva Jagatam Prinanam, compassion to everyone; Anuraktata, attracts everyone; Sadguna, bestows good qualities; and the 4th one is Sukham. So these 2 characteristics of pure devotional service, namely Kleshagni and Shubhada, develop on the platform of Sadhana Bhakti. Okay, they develop on the platform of Sadhana Bhakti. And then going ahead, so this is the major description. These first 2 characteristics are the major description. The others are not so much, because they are actually dependent on these first 2. So now coming to the characteristics in Bhava Bhakti, and that is Moksha Lagutaprit. Now this is very much connected to our discussion on happiness and devotional service, but this is developed on the platform of Bhava Bhakti. Those in pure devotional service derive even the conception of liberation. We've already discussed it actually, but just to put it in context, that so on the high stage of Bhava Bhakti, then even liberation means becoming free from material miseries. That is basically liberation, the desire for liberation, to be free from all types of material miseries which arise due to contact with the 3 gunas. So when it comes to the practice of pure devotional service, then even liberation becomes insignificant. So because one tastes a much higher happiness in devotional service and serving the Supreme Lord, even though there may be some apparent difficulties, anxieties in the practice of devotional service. So we already read this from the Narada Pancharatra, that automatically the devotee gets all the joys of dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. And Srila Prabhupada would often quote Bilba Mangal Thakur, where he says, Mukti Mukulatanjali Sevate Asman, that even Mukti personified, liberation personified, stands with folded hands in front of the devotee's doorstep, begging, please give me some service. So that's how the devotee automatically gets the results of dharma, artha, kama, and even moksha. And so therefore, even the desire for moksha becomes insignificant for a devotee. Now, the other characteristic on the platform of Bhava Bhakti is Sudurlabha. Pure devotional service is rarely achieved. So this especially refers to Bhava Bhakti. So many may get an opportunity for Sadhana Bhakti, and especially in this age, by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, many people are getting an opportunity for practicing Sadhana Bhakti. But then to proceed from Sadhana Bhakti to Bhava Bhakti, which is on a very high purified platform, that is rarely achieved. That is rarely achieved. Okay, so now somebody can read from the book, The Rareness of Pure Devotional Service.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. The rareness of pure devotional service. In the preliminary phase of spiritual life, there are different kinds of austerities, penances, and similar processes for attaining self-realization. However, even in an executor of these processes is without any material desire, he still cannot achieve devotional service. And aspiring by oneself alone to achieve devotional service is also not very hopeful, because Krishna does not agree to award devotional service to merely anyone. Krishna can easily offer a person material happiness or even liberation, but he does not agree very easily to award a personal engagement in his devotional service. Devotional service can in fact be attained only through the mercy of a pure devotee. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Leela 19.151, it is said, by the mercy of the spiritual master who is a pure devotee and by the mercy of Krishna, one can achieve the platform of devotional service. There is no other way.
Continue, please, till the end of the section.
The rarity of devotional service is also confirmed in Tantra Shastra, where Lord Shiva says to Sati, "My dear Sati, if one is a very fine philosopher, analyzing the different processes of knowledge, he can achieve liberation from the material entanglement. By performance of the ritualistic sacrifices recommended in the Vedas, one can be elevated to the platform of pious activities and thereby enjoy the material comforts of life to the fullest extent. But all such endeavors can hardly offer anyone devotional service to the Lord. Not even if one tries for it by such process for many, many thousands of births." In Srimad Bhagavatam, it is also confirmed by Prahlad Maharaj that merely by personal efforts or by the instructions of higher authorities, one cannot attain to the stage of devotional service. One must become blessed by the dust of the lotus feet of a pure devotee, who is completely freed from the contamination of material desires. In the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th chapter, verse 18, Narada also says to Yudhishthira, "My dear king, it is Lord Krishna, known as Mukunda, who is the eternal protector of the Pandavas and the Yadus. He is also your spiritual master and instructor in every respect. He is the only worshipable God for you. He is very dear and affectionate, and he is the director of all your activities, both individual and familial. And what's more, he sometimes carries out your orders as if he were your messenger. My dear king, how very fortunate you are, because for others, all these favors given to you by the Supreme Lord would not even be dreamt of." The purport of this verse is that Lord easily offers liberation, but he rarely agrees to offer a sole devotional service, because by devotional service, the Lord himself becomes purchased by the devotee. Correct.
Yes. So, so pure devotional service, that means Bhava Bhakti, is very rarely achieved. Why? The essential reason, as Srila Prabhupada is making at the end of this section, is that Krishna is ready to offer anything, even up to liberation, but he rarely offers pure devotional service, because then he actually becomes sold out to such a pure devotee. And the example is the Pandavas, how Krishna agreed to perform menial services for the Pandavas. So just like a menial servant, and to the extent of becoming a charioteer for his devotee Arjuna. And so therefore, Krishna doesn't offer pure devotional service so easily. And so therefore, going on this discussion of why Bhava Bhakti Sudurlabha. So this point we had already read. So it cannot be achieved by one's own efforts. So one may perform so many different efforts, austerities, penances, similar processes one may perform. But by one's own efforts, one cannot get Bhava Bhakti. So an important principle we should always remember is sadhana bhakti is something which is very much dependent on our own efforts. But Bhava Bhakti and Prema Bhakti are awarded by the Lord. So this is something which one cannot acquire by one's own efforts. Because as we'll be studying later on, Bhava Bhakti and Prema Bhakti, these are platforms where Shuddha Sattva enters into the heart of the devotee. And so therefore, this is actually the spiritual energy, the Chit Shakti. And so therefore, the spiritual energy, the spiritual potency can only be bestowed upon by the Lord himself. And therefore, it is not possible to achieve Bhava and Prema simply by one's own efforts. So now this is what Rupa Goswami is writing. Sudurlabha sadhanogher anasangher alabhya suchiradapi harina shashvadayeti dvidha sasyat sudurlabha. Bhakti is rarely attained. Bhakti is difficult to attain in two ways. If undertaken in great quantity, but without attachment, bhakti cannot be attained even after a long time. So this means that One may perform a lot of bhakti in terms of quantity. So one may perform a lot of austerities, a lot of services, one may do all that. But if one is performing all of them without attachment to the Lord, without the purpose of pleasing the Lord, then Krishna is not satisfied with that type of bhakti, because there's no bhakti there, but there is no love. Then Krishna is not happy with that, because this may have been discussed in Bhagavad Gita in the verse Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam, because what Krishna essentially wants is the bhakti, is the love and devotion, the attachment. That is what Krishna is looking for. And even if practiced with attachment, Krishna does not give bhakti to the practitioner immediately. So, and even if practiced with attachment, one cannot demand that Krishna give bhava and prema, because bhava and prema are totally the prerogative of Krishna. They're totally in Krishna's hands. So why Krishna really awards that? This point we have already discussed. The Lord himself becomes purchased by the devotee. And this point also we have seen. This is the example of the Pandavas. This is the quote from the 5th canto, which we already read from Srila Prabhupada's book. So how Krishna became sold out to the Pandavas because of the Pandavas' practice of pure devotional service. And as Srila Prabhupada writes in the 1st canto of the Bhagavatam, the Pandavas were malleable in the hands of the Supreme Lord. And because they were totally malleable, they were ready to do anything for the Supreme Lord, then the Supreme Lord also reciprocated by actually becoming their servants. Therefore, the actual meaning here is, even though one executes sadhana bhakti with attachment, asanga, until the time that one produces intense asakti in that bhakti, the Lord does not give bhava bhakti. This is characterized by the phrase, anya abhilashita shunyam, that bhakti should be completely devoid of other desires. So definitely there must be a quality in the practice of our devotional service. So as the essential quality is, as we have discussed, there must be no material desires, anya abhilashita shunyam, jnana karma dhyana vritam, all that. So definitely there must be that quality in the practice of devotional service. And when there's the quality in the practice of devotional service, then gradually one progresses to developing asakti, a great attachment to the Lord. And then the Lord is pleased by that. And then he can award bhava and prema. But the important point which Srila Prabhupada mentions is that one must become blessed by the dust of the lotus feet of a
Hare Krishna Prabhu, nothing is audible.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Anandaram Prabhu. Okay. Even I am not able to hear. I didn't know if it is only me.
Prabhuji is having network problems. Being power gone.
Hare Krishna. Can you hear?
Yes,
Yes,
Prabhuji. Hare
Yes,
Krishna.
Prabhu,
Yes,
we
Prabhu.
can hear you.
There was some internet problem.
Yes.
So we were making the point that so therefore, in order to please Krishna, by which Krishna can award bhava and prema, it is very, very essential that we please the pure devotee. That is what Prahlad Maharaj also says. And we also have the famous conversation between Maharaj Raghuna and Jad Bharat, Raghunaita Tapasana Yati. So there also he mentions that Vina Pada Rajo Abhishekam. So he says that without the Abhishek, without receiving the dust of the lotus feet of the pure devotees, it is not possible for one to actually please the Supreme Lord and achieve bhava and prema. So therefore, on the path of devotional service, pleasing the pure devotee, surrendering to the pure devotee, and pleasing him by our devotional service is something which is very, very important, because that's our Siddhanta, that's Krishna's policy actually. So Krishna actually becomes very pleased when Srimati Radharani is pleased. Okay, so Srila Prabhupada in his lectures on Radhashtami would say that if Srimati Radharani says to Krishna that here is a devotee, he's actually better than me, please accept, then Krishna cannot refuse. Krishna is obliged because of the pure devotional service of Srimati Radharani. And so therefore, when there is a representative of Srimati Radharani, the pure devotee, so the pure devotees take shelter of the internal potency, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, verse 13. Matmanastumam partha devim prakritam ashrita bhajanti ananne manaso gyatva bhutadim avyayam. So because the Mahatmas, the pure devotees, take shelter of the internal potency, devim prakriti, they take shelter of the internal potency, that is Srimati Radharani. This is pleasing to Krishna. And when we please the pure devotees, so when we please the pure devotees who have taken shelter of the internal potency of the Lord, then that's how ultimately we are pleasing Srimati Radharani, and that is the only way we can actually please Krishna. So therefore, on the path of devotional service, surrender to the lotus feet of the pure devotee, the spiritual master, following his instructions, pleasing him, pleasing the Vaishnavas. All these principles are very, very important on the path of devotional service. So simply by our own endeavors, we cannot please Krishna. We should always remember the Siddhanta. Our endeavors should be directed towards pleasing the pure devotee. On our own, our endeavors cannot please Krishna, because what does Krishna care for our limited endeavors? Our endeavors are insignificant. But when those endeavors please a pure devotee and the pure devotee recommends, then Krishna is pleased to award bhava and prema. Otherwise, it is sudurlabha, extremely rare. Okay. So now the next characteristic is Sandrananda Visheshatma. Now these are the characteristics of Prema Bhakti in addition to the previous ones. So Sandrananda Visheshatma means pure devotional service automatically puts one in transcendental pleasure. So it's incalculable condensed bliss. So we cannot even imagine the level of happiness with somebody on Prema experiences. So this is the Prema of the gopis and such devotees, highly elevated devotees who are totally attached to Krishna. So this is the highest level of Prema. So that happiness is incomparable to any other happiness that one can think of. And so Rupa Goswami says, Brahmanando bhavedesha chet parardha gunikritaha naiti bhakti sukam bodhe paramanu tulam api. So he says that if Brahmananda, or the happiness of becoming one with the Supreme, is multiplied by 1 trillion fold, it still cannot compare to an atomic fraction of the happiness derived from the ocean of devotional service. Okay, so that's how even Brahmananda, the happiness of merging the impersonal Brahman, is also insignificant in comparison to the happiness one derives on the platform of Prema. So the Hari Bhakti Sudodaya says, "O Guru of the universe, on seeing you directly, I am situated in a pure ocean of bliss. All the happiness of impersonal Brahman is as insignificant as the water in the hoofprint of a cow." And then what to speak of material happiness, totally insignificant. Right, and so that's, and to substantiate this, there is this famous verse describing the transformation of the four Kumaras. The four Kumaras were Brahmavadis attached to the impersonal Brahman, but when they saw the beautiful form of Lord Narayan at the gates of Vaikuntha, I'm sure most of you know the pastime of how Jay and Vijay stopped them and they became angry and all that. And then Lord Narayan comes to the gates of Vaikuntha, and then they smell the tulsi. Tasya Ravinda Nayanasya Pada Ravinda Kinjal Kamishtra Tulasi Makaranda Vayu Antargata Swavirena Chakara Tesham Sankshobam Aksharajusham Apichitta Tanabo. When the breeze carrying the aroma of tulsi leaves from the toes of the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead entered the nostrils of those sages, they experienced a change both in body and in mind, even though they were attached to the impersonal Brahman understanding. So even though they were attached to the impersonal Brahman, but by seeing the beautiful form of Narayan and smelling the tulsi, then immediately their hearts became transformed and they actually experienced symptoms of ecstasy. So that's how the prema, on the level of prema, the happiness is much higher, or rather the happiness of even Brahmananda is insignificant in comparison to the happiness at the level of prema. So that is what is called as Sandrananda Visheshatma. So these are three levels of happiness. So on the level, in sadhana bhakti, we discussed in the characteristics of Shubhadha. So at the level of sadhana bhakti also there is happiness. At the level of bhava bhakti also there is happiness, that is called as moksha lagutakrit. And at the level of prema also there is happiness, that is called Sandrananda Visheshatma. So all these are different levels of happiness as one progresses in devotional service. And so as one progresses in devotional service, one should actually be experiencing greater and greater levels of happiness. And then it becomes very easy for one to give up all types of material happiness and even the happiness of impersonal liberation. And finally, the last characteristic of pure devotional service, the Shri Krishna Akarshani. Pure devotional service is the only means to attract Krishna. So somebody can read from the book, Attracting Krishna. So you can read the first two paragraphs.
Hare Krishna. Srila Rupa Goswami has stated that devotional service attracts even Krishna. Krishna attracts everyone, but devotional service attracts Krishna. The symbol of devotional service is the highest in highest degree is Radharani. Krishna is called Madan Mohana, which means that he is so attractive that he can defeat the attraction of thousands of cupids. But Radharani is still more attractive, for she can even attract Krishna. Therefore, devotees call her Madan Mohana Mohini, the attractor of Cupid. To perform devotional service means to follow in the footsteps of Radharani, and devotees in Vrindavana put themselves under the care of Radharani in order to achieve perfection in their devotional service. In other words, devotional service is not an activity of the material world. It is directly under the control of Radharani. In Bhagavad Gita, it is confirmed that the Mahatmas are great souls under the protection of Daivi Prakriti, the internal energy, Radharani. So being directly under the control of internal potency of Krishna, devotional service attracts even Krishna himself.
Okay, fine. So this point we already discussed to some extent that, yes, because Radharani is actually on the Mahabhav platform, the highest level of prema. So actually the Mahabhav platform cannot be achieved by any jiva of the material world. So this is the highest platform of love. And so therefore that devotional service of Srimati Radharani actually attracts Krishna. And as Srila Prabhupada is mentioning here, because the Mahatmas, they put themselves under the control of the internal energy, therefore their devotional service also attracts Krishna. So this is the only way to attract Krishna, pure devotional service. This is, of course, on the level of prema. So that is what actually attracts Krishna. And here again, the example of the Pandavas is being given, that how the Pandavas were actually on the level of prema, and their devotional service was so attractive to Krishna that Krishna agreed to become their servant. And so therefore, Prabhupada concludes this discussion on Sri Krishna Akarshani by saying that, so that was the position of the Pandavas. Although Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the greatest among all greats, he remained with those royal brothers, being attracted by their devotion, by their friendship, and by their love. That is a proof of how great this process of devotional service is. It can attract even the Supreme Personality of Godhead. God is great, but devotional service is greater than God because it attracts him. People who are not in devotional service can never understand what great value there is in rendering service to the Lord. And as Srila Prabhupada said, the Mayavadis are trying to become God, but the devotees actually become greater than God because they purchase God by their devotional service. So that is the greatness of pure devotional service, especially Prema Bhakti, because it attracts even Krishna. Okay, so these are the 6 characteristics of pure devotional service: Kleshagni, Shubhada, Moksha Lagutakrit, Sudurlabha, Sandrananda Visheshatma, and Sri Krishna Akarshan. Okay, fine. So maybe we can take a few questions if there are any before we conclude.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Sorry, again, about one point on the suffering. So at one stage, it was said that Krishna gives suffering to remove any remnants of material attachment. And then there was another slide which said that a devotee automatically gets the benefits of dharma, artha, kama. So at which stage the devotee gets the suffering? Is it after achieving the dharma, artha, kama, moksha, or is it before that, so that the remnants are gone? So both seem very contradicting, so I got confused.
I'm not very clear about the question. So you're asking whether
in one of the
so you're
slides,
asking whether a devotee becomes free from suffering after getting dharma, artha, kama, moksha, before that. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. In one of the slides, it mentioned that Krishna gives suffering to remove any remnants of attachment to material enjoyment. In another slide, it mentions that a devotee automatically gets the benefit of dharma, artha, kama, moksha, which means that he's already got all the benefits. So is the devotee actually enjoying or suffering, because they seem contradictory to each other?
Okay, fine. So yes, so a devotee, he can get. Now it is not that the devotee will get. The devotee can get all the benefits of dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Just like, to give examples, just like Dhruva Maharaj. So Dhruva Maharaj, of course, he initially went to have the kingdom greater than his great-grandfather. And then after he had darshan of the Supreme Lord, he lost that desire. But even though he lost the desire, Krishna gave him the kingdom anyways. And of course, he gave him the pole star, which is like an eternal planet. So Krishna gave him, but at that point of time, he never wanted to enjoy it. Then he was simply ruling that kingdom as a matter of duty. Similarly, we find that Krishna gave Sudama opulence greater than even Indra, the king of heaven. So Krishna knows exactly what is best for the devotee, and he gives that. So so just like in the case of Srila Prabhupada, in the case of Srila Prabhupada, initially when the Lord thought that he was attached to family life and business, Krishna took away everything. Krishna took away everything, made him helpless, poverty-stricken when he was in Vrindavan. Then he went to the West and preached. Krishna gave him so much. As Srila Prabhupada himself said, I went with 40 rupees, now I have property worth more than 40 crores. So who's a better businessman than me? Srila Prabhupada said this publicly in a lecture. So initially Krishna took everything away, and then he gave him so much, much beyond his expectation. But that it's not that he wanted to enjoy it. That was all ultimately used for the service of Krishna. So when the devotee actually becomes totally purified, then Krishna gives, if that is what is required for service. Like we were stating the example of, or Srila Prabhupada states the example of Kolavaja Sridhar. Now, Kolavaja Sridhar never became rich. He always remained poor. But he was satisfied with that. Nor did he require more riches for service. So Krishna knows exactly how to reciprocate with the devotee and what is best for the devotee. So if Krishna wants, he can give. So the point is that when the devotee becomes purified, so especially when a devotee is not yet purified and he has material attachments, then there is less likelihood that Krishna may give material opulence to such a devotee, especially if a devotee is sincerely wanting to progress. So if a devotee is sincerely wanting to progress and he has material attachments, then Krishna may not actually give material opulence, rather he may take away so that he becomes more dependent on Krishna. But on the other hand, if a devotee is already completely purified and he has no tendency to enjoy the world, then Krishna may give if that is what is required for his service, because he knows that even if he gives, he's going to use it only for his service. He's not going to enjoy for himself. So in this way, Krishna reciprocates differently with different devotees. It ultimately all depends on the devotee's desire and what Krishna thinks is best for the devotee.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Yeah, it answers. So I understood that basically based on the need and what is best in terms of devotional service,
Yes.
Krishna decides what is best for this particular devotee to take or to give.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
Finally, Krishna wants to take us. So finally, with this particular explanation, Prabhuji, in my understanding, so overall, Krishna wants to go back to Godhead. So based
Krishna
upon
wants to take us back to God.
Back to Godhead. So based upon that situation, whether what kind of mode you are in, he does take or he does give. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, Prabhuji. Very good. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Any other questions? Okay, good. So no more questions. Thank you very much. So we will begin the next chapter in our next class on Friday. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu ki jai. Srila Rupa Goswami Pad ki jai. Samved Gaur Bhakta Vranda ki jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare. I just wanted to ask, is the speed okay? Are we going too fast or is it all right?
We are good, Prabhuji.
This is all right, Prabhuji. This is all right.
Okay, fine.
Prabhuji, one more request. Can we also get the access to the PowerPoint, Prabhuji, because many things are not in the book. So
yes, okay. Okay, fine. So yes, I will send you the Word document of the slides. Okay. Okay. So somebody can just send me a mail. So if somebody sends me a mail, I'll reply to them.
Okay, Prabhuji. I'll ask you another.
Okay. Yes, fine. Okay. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Dandavad Pranam.